Greetings, citizens of the world. State Department officials worry that an effort to release thousands of records is aimed at tarnishing Hillary Clinton and pushing more staffers to quit. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's assignment of as many as several hundred State Department officials to quickly clear a huge backlog of public records requests is being met with deep skepticism by rank-and-file employees. Tillerson says his goal is transparency. But many state workers fear the real reason is political, expediting the public release of thousands of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's official emails. The staffers also suspect the move, which will reassign many of them from far more substantive duties and has already sparked a union complaint, is meant to force many of them to resign out of frustration with what are essentially clerical positions. The issue spotlights the deepening distrust toward Tillerson at Foggy Bottom, where his attempts to restructure the department, cut its budget and centralize policy-making have already hurt morale. But it is drawing applause from conservative groups, which have been pressuring Tillerson to act on a backlog of 13,000 Freedom of Information Act requests, many of them relating to emails and other records from Clinton's tenure. We haven't understood why there's been a slow walking of releasing records, and we've been quite public in counseling the administration to take an approach of extreme transparency, said Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, a conservative activist group that has sued the Trump administration for more Clinton documents. It looks like someone's listening, Fitton added. Current and former career diplomats scoff at such talk. They say the real story is Tillerson's contempt for a State Department workforce he sees as bloated, and one that President Donald Trump views as a Democratic stronghold loyal to Clinton, who served as Secretary of State from 2009-13. While many of the people assigned to open records duty are lower-level staffers and interns, some have previously held prestigious posts, helping shape U.S. foreign policy and engaging in high-level diplomacy. Nothing better illustrates the view of the Trump administration that U.S. diplomats are nothing more than overpaid clerks, said Thomas Countryman, a retired career Foreign Service officer who served as Assistant Secretary of State in the Obama administration. Tillerson announced his decision to ramp up FOIA processing in an October 17 email to state employees. Tillerson has set an ambitious, some say implausible, goal of clearing the backlog by the end of this year. Suspicions around his motivation are being fueled in part by an October 27 CNN report that, citing unnamed sources, said Trump is pushing the State Department to release any remaining Clinton emails it may still have and that the president had asked Tillerson to clear the department's backlog of unfulfilled records requests. According to Judicial Watch, the State Department has yet to process about 40,000 pages of at least 72,000 records that contain Clinton emails. However, State Department officials have indicated they believe that many of those still unreleased documents are duplicates of information already shared with the public. Recent waves of releases of Clinton-related records have yielded little fresh material. Tillerson's email made no mention of Clinton, Trump's Democratic rival in the 2016 presidential election. But many of the outstanding open records requests are related to her tenure as Secretary of State and have become a subject of intense interest among conservative activists who say the Trump administration hasn't done enough to act on them. There has been no substantial change whatsoever in the Rex Tillerson State Department or the Jeff Sessions Justice Department about Mrs. Clinton's emails, legal analyst Andrew Napolitano told Fox Business Network in August. Tillerson's email said the department's FOIA backlog stretches back roughly a decade and would take at least 2 years to clear without more resources. To cut that time, the department will commit more people to open records duty and streamline the process so as to move toward the goal of a more responsive, more accountable, and more transparent State Department, Tillerson wrote. Tillerson did not say how many state officials would be reassigned, but sources familiar with the situation say hundreds of state staffers will be affected, either part-time or full-time, because every bureau has been told to commit people to review and release records. The sources also said Tillerson is calling for the backlog to be cleared by the end of the year, a goal that may prove impossible. It's a remarkable misuse of resources to advance what is at its core a partisan political aim, one affected state employee said. We all know what's going on. And, of course, we're all unhappy that we're being made a part of it." The State Department's press section did not respond to questions from Politico about whether Tillerson is motivated by a desire to release the Clinton emails, instead issuing a statement largely echoing Tillerson's October 17 memo. But White House spokesman Raj Shah cast Tillerson's open records drive as part of Trump's overall goal to see all government agencies be more transparent. The State Department has already begun work to reduce one of the worst backlogs in the federal government, and the administration has issued guidance instructing all agencies to increase efficiency and reduce FOIA backlogs, Shah wrote in an email. "This is the people's government, and decades of waiting for records the government is obligated to produce is no longer acceptable." Government watchdogs, however, say they've seen no signs of similar initiatives at other departments and agencies. In particular, there has been no comparable involvement by an agency head like Secretary Tillerson in the FOIA process lately, said Stephen Aftergood, director of the Federation of American Scientists Project on Government Secrecy. But the backlog at state is particularly large, driven in part by a focus on former Secretary Clinton and her tenure in the department. The State Department is a favorite target of open records requests from journalists as well as activist organizations, and past secretaries of state have struggled to contain the mushrooming requests. The demand for Clinton's emails, sparked by revelations in 2015 that she had used a private server while Secretary of State, shed an especially harsh light on state's sluggish record release process. John Kerry, Tillerson's predecessor as Secretary of State, named a transparency coordinator to try to speed things up. Kerry's FOIA surge called for the addition of 50 reviewers and administrative staff. Many of the reviewers were retired Foreign Service officers brought back on board to help out. Moira Whelan, who served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary under Kerry, downplayed diplomats' concerns that Tillerson's FOIA push is an anti-Clinton drive. "If more right-wing groups are FOIA-ing than left-wing groups, that is what it is. It's FOIA, it's a system for everyone," she said. "It doesn't matter what the motivation is. Any secretary should try to make it a priority." Still, a State Department official familiar with the situation told Politico that the initiative is causing panic in some managers as well as Foreign Service officers because Human Resources needs to pull bodies to the FOIA office. Competition for other assignments also has intensified as people try to avoid being FOIA'd. Tillerson's FOIA push also is leading many employees, who hail from both the civil service and the Foreign Service, to consider quitting the State Department altogether. That may help Tillerson fulfill another goal, trimming state's headcount. The Secretary has said he wants to cut at least 2,300 positions through a combination of buyouts and attrition. The department's press office did not respond to a request for information about how close Tillerson is to achieving that goal. The State Department has 75,000 employees across the world. Tillerson also has moved to shut down more than 30 special envoy offices, including that of the Transparency Coordinator, and staffers from some of those offices may be shifted over to FOIA duty. In the wake of Tillerson's email, representatives with the American Federation of Government Employees have filed a complaint on behalf of civil servants being given open records duties at state. A union official said the complaint, lodged with the Federal Labor Relations Authority, requests an investigation into whether the department is violating labor laws by changing people's working conditions without negotiating with the union. Tillerson's push to clear the FOIA backlog is in some ways fitting with his professional background. As a former CEO of ExxonMobil, Tillerson has long been interested in organizational challenges. And, even as the U.S. faces major diplomatic tests, such as how to deal with North Korea's nuclear program and counter Iran's moves in the Middle East, Tillerson has said the most important thing he can do is reshape the State Department to be more effective and efficient. On the other hand, Tillerson's critics note, ExxonMobil was not known for being transparent under Tillerson. And since taking over as secretary in February, Tillerson has largely avoided the spotlight. He also has centralized decision-making to himself and a handful of aides to such a degree that much of the department's rank and file feels sidelined. The House Intelligence Committee is shutting down its contentious investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, the top Republican leading the probe announced on Monday. The committee will interview no more witnesses and Republicans are in the process of preparing their final report, Representative Mike Conaway, Republican Texas, told reporters. A draft of that roughly 150-page report will be delivered to committee Democrats for review on Tuesday. The draft document asserts that there is no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, the most politically charged question examined by the committee. It will also contradict an official U.S. intelligence community assessment that Russian President Vladimir Putin showed a preference for Donald Trump during the race, another assertion that Trump has disputed. "We found no evidence of collusion," Conaway said Monday. "We found perhaps some bad judgment, inappropriate meetings, inappropriate judgment in taking meetings, but only Tom Clancy could take this series of inadvertent contacts, meetings, whatever, and weave that into some sort of a spy thriller that could go out there." Further, he said, "We couldn't establish the same conclusion that the CIA did that, the Russians, specifically wanted to help Trump." Trump applauded the committee's findings on Twitter. The House Intelligence Committee has, after a 14-month-long in-depth investigation, found no evidence of collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. The announcement is unlikely to herald any bipartisan conclusion to the central questions in an investigation that for more than a year has been mired in investigatory offshoots, leaks and bitter fighting between committee members. The top Democrat on the panel, Representative Adam Schiff, California, in a blistering statement called the end of the probe a tragic milestone and a capitulation to the executive branch. By ending its oversight role in the only authorized investigation in the House, the majority has placed the interests of protecting the president over protecting the country, and history will judge its actions harshly, Schiff wrote. Schiff in his statement emphatically rejected the GOP's assertion that the Russians did not seek to help Trump's campaign, saying the evidence is clear and overwhelming that the intelligence community assessment was correct. If the Russians do have leverage over the President of the United States, the majority has simply decided it would rather not know, he said. Republicans have said for months that they were ready to wind down the investigation, having found no evidence of collusion. Democrats paint a different picture, warning that Republicans are protecting the president by failing to conduct a serious investigation. Conaway said Monday that he expects Democrats to make extensive changes to the draft report Republicans will deliver on Tuesday. Lawmakers from both parties have long said that Democrats would likely issue their own report. The GOP report will confirm a broad-based Russian active measures campaign designed to sow discord during the 2016 presidential race, as well as a lackluster pre-election response to that campaign. It will also include how anti-Trump research made its way from Russian sources to the Hillary Clinton campaign, an apparent reference to the controversial dossier of opposition research on Trump compiled in part by former British spy Christopher Steele, who was hired by the research firm Fusion GPS. "We will say that there was an attempt to use foreign sources with respect to the Clinton campaign," Conaway said. "It was clear that there was, at least Steele, and however much he talked and didn't talk to Russians, that's foreigners, and that information was paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign," Conaway said, adding, "I don't have any direct evidence that they knew about it." The GOP report will also include a section covering what the committee believes were criminal leaks related to the dossier, though Conaway said the committee lacked the evidence to make a criminal referral to the Justice Department. The draft report also includes recommendations for both Congress and the executive branch, centered on election security, government response to cyber attacks and support to European allies. The investigation, launched in January 2017, is coming to a close after lawmakers reviewed more than 300,000 documents and interviewed 73 witnesses, including former White House chief strategist Stephen Bannon, Donald Trump Jr. and Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. As initially conceived, the probe was tasked with 4 investigatory pillars: including the Russian interference effort, the government's response to that campaign, leaks of classified information related to those matters and any ties between Russia and individuals associated with political campaigns. Despite regular outbreaks of internecine fighting, the investigation has produced one of the most significant public developments in the Russia saga to date. It was at a public committee hearing that then FBI Director James Comey revealed that the Bureau was investigating the matter. It was also the genesis of an ongoing GOP investigation, spearheaded by House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, Republican California, into what some House Republicans say were gross abuses of U.S. surveillance authorities. In a dramatic moment, Nunes stepped back from leading the investigation amidst a now-closed Ethics Committee investigation into whether he revealed classified information during an impromptu press conference last spring. It was then that Conaway took over the investigation, though Democrats have complained that Nunes continued to assert his authority behind the scenes. Nunes has insisted the ethics investigation, which cleared him of any wrongdoing, was a political sham. Relations on the panel were further rocked earlier this year when committee Republicans forced the publication of a formerly classified memo prepared by Nunes' staff alleging surveillance abuses, over the objections of both Democrats and the FBI. Although Democrats were later permitted to release their own counter-memo, they have since called on Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican Wisconsin, to remove Nunes from his post as chairman. Committee Republicans have said the investigations into surveillance abuses are separate from the Russia probe. Those reviews are ongoing, Conaway said Monday. The panel has also been split by disputes over subpoenaing witnesses. Democrats have complained that Republicans have allowed witnesses to set the parameters of their testimony at the behest of the White House, a characterization disputed by Conaway on Monday. Broad statement: you use subpoenas when you think you can actually get something from them, and we're not particularly confident that the subpoena process will get us any more than we had, he said. We also think we have the evidence we need to come to the conclusions we've come to. The committee will not pursue steps to enforce the subpoena of Bannon, who frustrated both Republicans and Democrats by refusing to answer questions outside of the 25 scripted by the White House during a pair of interviews this year. The raucous investigation in the House has been dramatically different from a parallel probe underway in the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has largely kept its work under wraps and whose leaders have presented a united front. The Senate panel's work is ongoing. Its first product, a report on election security, is expected to be released in the coming weeks. Conaway on Monday declined to set a timeline for the public release of the House report, which must first be sent back to the intelligence community to be scrubbed for classified information. He said the report would not be shared with the Senate Intelligence Committee before publication,